There is a moment in every human life when reality interrupts illusion, when a person is forced to confront a truth they have been avoiding. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It comes quietly, often in moments of silence, when distractions fade and the mind turns inward. And in that moment, one realization becomes impossible to escape. Someone you once overlooked actually mattered more than you were willing to admit. If someone has been occupying your thoughts, or you sense that you've been lingering in someone else's mind, it is not accidental. The human psyche does not fixate without reason. Attention follows value, and value often reveals itself only after distance creates contrast. When presence is removed, the mind finally measures its weight. People rarely recognize importance while comfort remains intact. They recognize it when stability weakens, when emotional support is no longer guaranteed, when the familiar voice, the steady presence, the quiet understanding is suddenly absent. That absence creates disorder, and disorder forces reflection. What is happening now is not nostalgia. It is not regret alone. It is a psychological reckoning, a slow realization forming in someone's mind that what they once treated as secondary was in fact foundational, that you were not simply there, you were holding something together. And now, as that structure trembles, they are beginning to understand your importance in a way they never did before. There comes a time in human relationships when the mind is no longer able to protect itself with excuses. For a long while, people can live inside comfortable assumptions. They tell themselves that certain connections are optional, that certain individuals are easily replaceable, that presence is merely convenient rather than meaningful. This belief is not born out of cruelty, but out of unconsciousness. The human mind is remarkably efficient at normalizing what is consistently available. When someone shows up repeatedly, offers understanding, stability, or emotional grounding, their value becomes invisible not because it is small, but because it is constant. What happens next is almost always triggered by loss or distance. When the person who once provided emotional structure steps back, the system destabilizes. The mind, which relies on patterns to maintain order, suddenly encounters a gap. Conversations no longer flow as they used to. Decisions feel heavier. Emotional reactions become exaggerated or confusing. This is not coincidence. It is the psyche reacting to the removal of something that was quietly regulating it. Only then does awareness begin to form. At first, the realization is resisted. The mind attempts substitution. It seeks distraction, replacement, noise. But substitutes lack depth. They fail to recreate the sense of alignment that existed before, and slowly, an uncomfortable truth begins to emerge. The stability that once existed did not come from circumstance. It came from a person, from their presence, their patience, their ability to listen, their consistency. What was once taken for granted now stands out precisely because it is missing. This realization carries with it a particular kind of psychological pain. It is not dramatic heartbreak. It is subtler and more dangerous. It is the pain of self-confrontation. Because recognizing someone's importance after neglecting it requires an admission of responsibility. It means acknowledging that the loss was not inevitable. It was shaped by inattention, by arrogance, by the assumption that time and effort were optional investments, and the human ego does not surrender easily. As the mind revisits past interactions, patterns become visible that were once ignored, moments of support that went unthanked, warnings that were dismissed, emotional labor that was accepted as normal rather than recognized as meaningful. Memory begins reorganizing itself, not to punish, but to make sense of the present discomfort. And in doing so, it highlights one central truth: the person now missing was not passive in your life. They were actively contributing to your emotional balance. This is where genuine realization takes place. Importance is no longer measured by intensity or excitement, but by impact. The mind starts to understand that real value often looks quiet. It looks like reliability, It looks like someone who stays when chaos arises. And when that person is gone, chaos no longer has a counterweight. What makes this moment transformative is that it changes perception permanently. Once the mind recognizes the role someone played in maintaining order, it cannot unsee it. Even if pride delays action, even if fear complicates response, the awareness remains. The person becomes mentally present in a new way, not as background, but as a reference point, a comparison, a standard. This is why someone may suddenly feel drawn back toward you in thought, not because of loneliness alone, but because the mind has finally assigned proper meaning to your role. It has recalculated. And in that recalculation, you are no longer optional. You are necessary. Once the mind has acknowledged the importance of what was lost, it enters a far more difficult phase: responsibility. This is the stage where awareness is no longer abstract. It becomes personal. It forces an individual to confront not only what they are missing, but why they are missing it. And this is where most people struggle, because responsibility threatens the protective stories they have told themselves for years. Human beings prefer explanations that preserve their self-image. We say circumstances changed. We say timing was wrong. We say emotions faded naturally. These narratives are comforting because they remove agency. But when someone truly mattered, when their presence provided emotional structure, meaning, or stability, those explanations begin to collapse. The mind senses the inadequacy of excuse. Something deeper is being asked. To come forward, honesty. At this stage, the realization becomes heavier. It is no longer just about absence. It is about behavior, about the moments when effort was withheld, when attention was divided, when emotional signals were minimized or dismissed. The mind begins replaying interactions not to romanticize them, but to audit them. And that internal audit is uncomfortable, because it reveals imbalance. It reveals that one person carried more weight, offered more patience, or showed more commitment than the other was willing to match. This imbalance generates guilt, but not the shallow kind. It produces a moral tension, a sense that something meaningful was mishandled. And that tension demands resolution. People respond to this demand in different ways. Some retreat further into avoidance, numbing themselves with distraction. Others attempt rationalization, convincing themselves that reaching out would be disruptive or pointless. But beneath those defenses, the pressure remains. Responsibility does not dissolve simply because it is ignored. What makes this phase psychologically significant is that it reshapes future behavior, even if reconciliation never occurs. Once someone recognizes that they failed to value something essential, they carry that knowledge forward. It informs their choices, their caution, their fear of repeating the same mistake. In this sense, your importance becomes embedded in their moral framework. You become part of the lesson their life has taught them. This realization often expresses itself indirectly. Instead of words, it shows up as hesitation in new connections, comparison that cannot be silenced, an internal standard that others struggle to meet. The mind is not longing for you out of sentimentality alone. It is responding to the recognition that you represented a level of meaning they did not know how to sustain at the time. Responsibility also introduces a quiet fear, the fear that acknowledgement may come too late, that the door, once assumed to be open, may now be closed. And this fear intensifies the weight of realization, because it reveals the final truth: importance is not permanent by default. It must be recognized, nurtured, and protected. And failing to do so carries consequences that time does not automatically reverse. This is why the awareness of your value lingers so persistently in their mind. It is not merely emotional attachment. It is ethical reckoning. The mind is grappling with the fact that something meaningful was undervalued, and that this undervaluation says something about who they were at that moment in their life. Whether or not action follows, this internal confrontation changes them, and it confirms something crucial for you: your importance was real. It did not arise from imagination or desire. It revealed itself through absence, through consequence, and through the unavoidable demand for responsibility that now lives quietly within them. After responsibility is recognized, the mind enters its most revealing stage, transformation through meaning. This is where realization stops being about regret and becomes about reorientation. When someone understands that they failed to recognize what truly mattered, they are forced to confront a deeper question, not just about the past, but about the kind of person they intend to be moving forward. And this question cannot be answered casually. Human beings organize their lives around meaning, whether consciously or not. When a person like you is present, you likely provided more than affection or attention. You offered coherence. You helped make sense of chaos. You listened when confusion arose. You brought stability when emotions became volatile. And that kind of contribution is not easily replaced, because it speaks to the fundamental human need for order in a complex world. Once that stabilizing force is gone, the individual begins to feel internally fragmented. Decisions take longer. Emotions feel heavier. Motivation weakens. This is not weakness. It is disorientation. The psyche has lost a reference point, and without it, everything feels slightly misaligned. That discomfort pushes the mind to search for meaning, and inevitably, it traces the absence back to you. At this stage, you are no longer remembered merely as a person. You become symbolic. You represent a time when things felt anchored, when life felt manageable, when there was someone who understood without constant explanation. This is why thoughts of you arise during moments of stress, doubt, or quiet reflection. The mind associates you with psychological safety, and safety is deeply meaningful. What follows is not always reconciliation, but it is growth. The realization reshapes their values. They begin to understand that real connection is not built on excitement alone, but on shared responsibility, honesty, and effort sustained over time. And this understanding often arrives painfully late, because meaning is easiest to recognize only after it has been disrupted. This transformation also exposes a harsh truth. Not every realization leads to repair. Sometimes awareness comes after opportunity has passed, and that knowledge forces humility. It teaches the individual that life does not endlessly offer the same lesson in the same form. People who bring meaning into our lives are not interchangeable. Losing one is not just losing a person, it is losing a particular structure of understanding. Because of this, your importance does not fade. Even if contact never resumes, even if circumstances prevent reunion, your role remains psychologically active. You become part of their internal compass, their standard for depth, their reminder of what happens when value is ignored. And that is a powerful position to occupy, whether you ever witness it or not. This is also where your own clarity matters. Their realization is not proof that you should wait, chase, or sacrifice yourself. It is proof that your presence had weight, that you contributed meaningfully, that you were not imagining your value. The fact that awareness emerged only after distance does not reduce that value. It confirms it. Ultimately, this stage is about integration. The mind integrates the lesson into identity, and once integrated, it cannot be undone. You become part of the story they tell themselves about growth, loss, and maturity. And even in silence, even without words exchanged, that story continues to shape them. So when you sense that someone is finally realizing your importance, understand this: it is not sudden. It is not shallow. It is the result of internal restructuring, a slow, difficult recognition of meaning that only absence could reveal. What matters most in the end is not whether they return, apologize, or finally speak the words you once needed to hear. What matters is the truth that has now been revealed quietly, undeniably, and beyond argument. Your importance was not a fantasy created by hope or desire. It was real, measurable, and proven by what happened when you were no longer there. Meaning does not announce itself in the moment. It reveals itself through consequence, and the consequence of your absence was awareness. That alone tells you everything you need to know. But here is the crucial distinction. Their realization is not your responsibility to manage. You are not required to wait for it, chase it, or validate it. Your task is to recognize what this moment says about you. You were someone who brought order, depth, and stability into another human life, and that is not a small thing. If they grow from this realization, it will be because your presence once showed them what responsibility and connection actually look like. If they do not, the lesson still stands. You are not insignificant. You are foundational. And once you understand that, you no longer need confirmation. You no longer need closure from someone else's awareness. Because the deepest power comes from knowing your value without
needing it to be spoken aloud.
That knowledge changes how you stand, how you choose, and how you move forward. And nothing, no silence, no distance, no delayed realization can take that away from you.